Hi all and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So on this channel we often take a look at quite a lot of phones, often rather expensive ones. I mean, recently we had a look at the Motorola Razr 40 Ultra and that costs 1,500 Australian dollars. Previously we had a look at the Think phone and that cost close to 1,000 Australian dollars, and my daily driver over here, an iPhone 14 Pro, costs $2,500. For the average person who does not care about smartphones, I admit that these phones could be rather expensive. So that begs the question, are more affordable options actually any good? Would I be satisfied if I were to use a budget phone as my daily? Let's find out. So over the past week, I've been using the OPPO A98 5G that they have just released. Thank you OPPO Australia for lending it to me for review. And while I've been pleasantly surprised in some areas, this phone also falls into some of the same budget phone traps that have long made me wary of more affordable phones in the past. If you would like to see more tech content from me, then make sure to like and subscribe, and also let me know what other phones you would like me to review in the comments. So the A98 5G is quite an interesting proposition for the brand, because while it's part of the budget A series lineup that also contains this A57 over here, which is one of the worst phones I've ever used, it's actually the flagship product of the A line. So instead of starting at, let's say, 350 Australian dollars like the A57, this actually costs a relatively monumental $650 unlocked. And while that does sound like a lot of money for a budget phone, if we were to take a look at the current landscape of phones where a base iPhone 14 costs $1,400, it actually does sort of make sense. Unfortunately though, this does place it along the lines of the Reno 10 at $750, and also even an older flagship like this, the X5, that was one of my favorite phones of last year, and you can get this for $799 at the moment. So what do you exactly get for your $650? Well, unlike some other OPPO phones in the past, it doesn't actually come with a case. It does, however, come with a few accessories, which is good. For example, you do get a massive 67-watt SuperVOOC charger, which is very generous, and you also get a USB-C cable. While this is not a lot of stuff, it is at least more than what you get with a Samsung or iPhone these days. And if we take a look at the phone now, on the front we've got a 6.7-inch LCD display that's both Full HD and 120Hz, which is quite good. It's got a hole punch cut out for the selfie camera on the top, which is nice as well. On the side we do have an aluminium frame in a lovely blue color. It feels rather lightweight but kind of solid at the same time. We've got a power button over here that also doubles up as a fingerprint reader. It works okay, but it is a little bit difficult to press. What's quite impressive though is that we've got a pair of stereo speakers, one on the bottom here and also another on the top, and it sounds remarkably good, especially for the price. On the bottom we've got a USB-C port, and shock horror, a 3.5mm headphone jack. Now we haven't seen one of those in a while. And over here we've also got a SIM card slot, which also doubles up as a micro SD card slot, which is quite cool. On the back we've got quite a reasonably sized camera hump, housing both a 64-megapixel main camera, a 2-megapixel depth camera, which is kind of useless, and also a 2-megapixel micro lens camera. That's actually quite interesting. I haven't really seen one of those on any other phone before. And now we come to quite possibly the worst part of the phone, the back cover material. Now, do we remember a time when people used to complain about how Samsung phones felt so cheap and plasticky? Well, that's exactly what this is. The back cover, instead of being the usual glass like the X5, it feels so good, this frosted glass material. This is actually made of a very lightweight, somewhat flimsy feeling plastic material with an absolutely hideous finish on it. I mean, the metallic bluish color looks okay, it's kind of cool actually, but this brush bit over here, oh my god, I hate this texture change. And what's worse is that it says innovative AI camera on it. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, the material just feels like it's made of the inner plastic lining of a tin of biscuits. It's just so nasty. So the back cover, I'm not a fan of. I think we've come to the conclusion. But I guess that you wouldn't really notice any of this if you were to put this in a case. And it does keep the weight down and also the price down. And talking about the weight, despite being the same size as an iPhone 14 Pro Max, it does not weigh a massive 240 grams like that phone, which is made up of glass and stainless steel. This just weighs 192 grams, which is actually considerably lighter than even the smaller iPhone 14 Pro, which I guess is rather impressive. And that's especially impressive once you realize what sits packing inside, because inside here is a 5000 milliamp battery, which is massive for a phone like this. And to put that into perspective, an iPhone 14 Pro Max only has a 4300 milliamp battery, and the smaller iPhone 14 Pro is a little over 3000, which is simply pathetic compared to this. The other specs also aren't too bad either. We've got a Snapdragon 695, which is a 5G chip, which is definitely something it's nice to have in this class, and it's paired with 8GB of RAM, which is very impressive for the price as well, and that's more than what you get on the iPhone. I think the iPhone 15 actually is only rumored to have 6GB as well, so that is definitely quite cool. And what's even better is that inside we've got 256GB of storage, which is plenty for most people. But if you are not most people, then it is expandable to up to 1TB, so you have all of the storage in the world. So how is this like to use then? Well, performance is actually rather decent. I'm not going to say it's the fastest thing in the world, but it will keep up with most of your demands. My experience with budget-oriented devices like the Unihertz Tank and also this previous A57 phone that I've tested before, they're just a little bit painful to use, because not only are they laggy, but they're just 60 Hz, which just feels absolutely awful after being used to high refresh rate displays. The A98 on the other hand does have a decent processor and also 120 Hz, so it almost feels as fast and smooth as something like a X5, which feels really, really good even to this day. Don't get me wrong, while there are a few stutters here and there, especially when scrolling long lists on Twitter, and apps do take a little bit longer to load than what one might be used to, overall scrolling is pretty smooth, and navigating the Color OS skinned Android 13 for the most part is relatively pleasant. What does betray the phone's budget price though is the screen. While the 120Hz is great, it's not exactly a fantastic looking LCD. The colors are relatively muted, and we've also got a distinctively blue hue that only gets worse when you view it at an angle. It's not so bad on camera, but especially when you compare it with OLED phones, it doesn't look brilliant. It does get reasonably bright though at 680 nits outdoors. You'll only have to squint a little probably when you're outside. For the price, unfortunately though, the competitors, especially Motorola and Samsung, do have OLED panels that look way better. So the screen on this phone at least is a little bit of a disappointment. And another disappointment is that I'm not exactly loving this version of Color OS. Well, I do actually love Color OS on some of OPPO's other phones, like the X5 over here. It's a fantastic Android skin, and also on the N2 Flip that I tried earlier this year. With this entry-level device though, they seem to have stuffed it with every possible piece of bloatware imaginable. Not only do we have, firstly, this weird sort of Bing Live wallpapers like thing that we used to find on Windows phones, where it will change the wallpaper every time you unlock the phone and give you like tips on how to bake Bakewell tart. Just very bizarre and not welcome or needed at all. And also when you get out of this app, it does stutter a little bit, and it brings up the vibration motor, which feels absolutely terrible. Just look at that. There's no transitions. It's just not a very slick piece of software. Overall, it just feels a little bit poorly done, and I don't really know what sort of user would enjoy using it. Aside from that, we have a bunch of the typical OPPO things, like the theme store, which I actually don't mind at all. I haven't used it on this phone yet, but you can change the theme quite easily. Some other baffling options though are, we've got the OPPO's own internet browser. I don't know anyone who asked for this, but we've got Google Chrome, we've got Microsoft Edge, we don't need Oppo's own internet browser. And what's even worse than that is that we've got Oppo's app market. Did anyone ask for this? There's only roughly 15 apps here. I don't think anyone wants it at all. It's ridiculous. We've got Oppo's own Photos app as well, which, you know, isn't the best thing in the world, but it's not egregious. What is egregious, on the other hand, are the millions of shovelware games that we've got, like Crowd Rush here. I don't know why they've decided to pre-install these, but these games are absolutely awful and are riddled with ads. I mean, what even is this? It's ridiculous. Apart from those pre-installed apps though, which you can get rid of, the rest of the OS is quick, it looks rather nice, and it is relatively nice to use. I especially do like on Oppo phones the back gesture. For example, when you go back, it does that. It's very nice and slick, that's fantastic. But yes, going back does remind me of the terrible vibration motor. So if you get this phone, definitely turn the vibration off, because it's among one of the worst vibration motors I've ever used. And that's quite unfortunate, because Oppo's more expensive phones like the X5 have really good vibration motors. It's really tight and powerful. But at least these stereo speakers are genuinely very good, and I guess I would take decent stereo speakers over a decent vibration motor if you could only have one of them. One upside though is battery life. It's been really impressive, easily lasting 2 whole days of moderate use because of the 5,000 milliamp size. The fast charging as well at 67 watts is also very impressive. You can charge to 100% in just 44 minutes, and they promise that the battery will retain 80% of charge after as many as 1600 cycles, which is far more than what the iPhone can promise, I guess. What's a little bit unfortunate again is that it doesn't have wireless charging, which for me is a must, but I guess that does keep the price down. And now let's get to the cameras. Okay, so firstly, the front-facing camera. It's let's just say it's a little bit mediocre. I don't know why they felt like that they needed to fit 32 megapixels in here, but for those who like them, at least there are all of the retouching filters that you might expect from a Chinese phone. Like, you know, you can make my cheeks rosier or whatever. You can make my eyes bigger. That is ridiculous, but if you like that sort of thing, it is here for you. What's more important though is the main camera, which claims to be 64 megapixels, but to me it's also just as unimpressive. Images simply are not very sharp. The colors look dull and unnatural, and the dynamic range is pretty disappointing as well. Just compare these images with the iPhone and it really just doesn't hold a candle. Video quality similarly is quite disappointing too. It tops out at 1080p. I feel like 4K is a must in this day and age, but the stabilization is also mediocre, and there really isn't anything to write home about in this package. The Hasselblad tuned cameras on Oppo's more expensive phones like the X5 are some of my favorite cameras I've ever had the pleasure to use on a phone. They've got really cool features like Hasselblad's filters and also the expand mode, but unfortunately this A98 does not get any of that. What is cool though is the micro lens camera that basically turns your phone into a microscope. So to enable it, all you have to do is go through the More menu over here and press Microscope. And what you are supposed to do is rest your phone horizontally against the surface that you want to take an image of, and you just lift the bottom a little bit. As you can see, the torch is on to light the subject, as very little light probably is getting under there. And over here we can see that we are seeing this letter very close up. And we can go in as close as 40 times. As you can see, that is actually genuinely very impressive. It's genuinely so cool to have this feature on a phone. Let's take a picture close up of this phone screen as well. Let's see how that looks. As we can see the dot matrix of the display here. That's quite cool. And we can compare that with an OLED phone like the X5. So this is how an OLED phone looks in comparison. Yeah. Look at that. But as cool as this feature is, I would probably take a glass back cover or a slightly better main camera over having this feature that I would probably use once or twice before forgetting about. So in conclusion, what are my thoughts on the OPPO A98 5G? Well, it's basically just too expensive. While the performance is quite good and I did enjoy using it, honestly it feels like a phone that should be closer to $500 rather than $650 Australian. Because that $650, while it is far more affordable than something like an iPhone 14 Pro, it's just a stone's throw away from OPPO's own Reno phones, and literally one of my favorite phones of all time, the X5, which retails for $799 from a variety of retailers. And something like the X5 is literally better in every conceivable way. It's honestly in a different league to this phone, and price-wise they are so similar. I suspect that the price will soon fall on the A98 5G, so it might be a good buy in a few months. But right now, when faced between the choice of the A98 and an older but originally far more expensive OPPO phone, I will take the X5 anytime. So if you like this video, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this. If you've got any questions about any of these phones, be sure to type them in the comment section. And on that note, toodaloo.